For centuries, collapses have followed a familiar pattern. Different countries, different currencies, different excuses, but the outcomes rhyme so closely that you can almost predict the survivors by their posture alone. In every breakdown, most people do what they were taught to do in normal times. They trust institutions. They trust paper promises. They assume the rules will be enforced because they always have been. And when those assumptions fail, the loss feels sudden, even though the pattern is ancient. Weimar Germany learned this in 5 short years. Argentina learned it in months. Rome learned it over generations. The details change, but the mechanics don't. What survives isn't cleverness. It isn't prediction. It isn't being early. What survives is alignment with a few structural realities that do not care about ideology, technology, or intent. This is not about collapse tourism or preparing for a specific scenario. It's about understanding why the same behaviors protect people across centuries, while others reliably wipe them out. The first reality is simple, and it has never failed. When systems fracture, paper claims die first. Money, stocks, bonds, pensions, bank deposits, all of them are promises. They work only as long as institutions can enforce them. Courts must function. Banks must remain solvent. Governments must honor contracts. When those conditions break, paper wealth doesn't slowly decline. It disappears. In Weimar Germany, bank balances didn't lose value gradually. They became unusable. A lifetime of savings could no longer buy bread, not because food vanished, but because the claim on value evaporated. Meanwhile, farmland still produced food. Buildings still sheltered families. Workshops still made goods. The prices changed wildly, but the assets themselves remained real. The same pattern repeated in Zimbabwe. Currency died. Livelihoods didn't. Those with land, tools, and productive equipment retained the ability to meet needs even as money became meaningless. Argentina showed the same structure from a different angle. The banks didn't fail outright. They simply rewrote the rules. Deposits were frozen, converted, and diluted overnight. Paper wealth obeyed new permissions. Physical assets didn't. This is not because hard assets are magical. It's because they don't require permission to exist. A farm doesn't need a functioning bond market to grow food. A building doesn't need a liquid stock exchange to provide shelter. Claims require enforcement. Reality doesn't. The second reality builds directly on the first. In collapse, the difference between survival and ruin is not what something is worth on paper, but whether it produces something people need. Speculative assets depend on buyers. Productive assets depend on reality. That distinction becomes absolute when markets freeze. During the Great Depression, stock prices collapsed nearly 90%. Speculators were wiped out. But farms continued to produce food. Rental properties still housed families. Small businesses that provided necessities didn't become wealthy, but they remained functional. Their value wasn't set by optimism, it was set by use. Venezuela's stock market tells the same story in reverse. On paper, it exploded upward. In reality, the currency collapsed underneath it. Nominal gains meant nothing. Meanwhile, bakeries, transportation networks, and food production retained real power. They didn't rely on resale. They relied on demand that never disappears. In every collapse, liquidity vanishes. Buyers disappear. Markets halt. When that happens, assets that only make sense when someone else is willing to pay more become inert. Assets that generate food, shelter, energy, or services remain relevant regardless of price discovery. Production outlives speculation every time. The third reality is less intuitive because it contradicts what works in stable systems. Debt is survivable only when income is stable. When income breaks, debt becomes fatal. In good times, debt looks like leverage. Borrowing accelerates growth. Rising asset values mask risk. But collapses do not reduce debts alongside incomes. They do the opposite. Income falls. Debt remains fixed. and the enforcement of that debt becomes more aggressive, not less. During the Great Depression, hundreds of thousands of farms were foreclosed, not because farmers were reckless, but because prices collapsed faster than obligations. The land still produced food, the families still worked it, but the debt structure didn't bend. It snapped them. Argentina repeated this with currency mismatch. Mortgages denominated in dollars became impossible to service when incomes collapsed in pesos. The asset didn't fail. The leverage did. Those who owned outright struggled, but remained housed. Those who were leveraged lost everything. The common counter-argument is inflation, the idea that debt disappears when money weakens. This only works when income inflates alongside prices. In real collapses, wages lag or collapse entirely. Inflation helps debtors only in controlled environments. Collapses are not controlled environments. Debt assumes continuity. Collapse removes it. The fourth reality is the most uncomfortable, because it strips away nearly every modern illusion of security. Everything external can be taken. Skills cannot. Property can be seized. Money can be inflated. Businesses can be nationalized. Borders can close. Accounts can be frozen. But what you know how to do remains with you. History is brutal on this point. During mass confiscations in Europe, wealth did not determine survival. Utility did. Doctors, mechanics, engineers, tailors, and craftsmen traded competence for food and safety. Those with titles and assets but no practical ability often did not. The Soviet Union erased private ownership overnight. Aristocrats starved. Skilled workers retained leverage because the system needed them. Vietnam's refugees arrived with nothing physical and rebuilt entire lives on expertise alone. Skills function as portable production. They move with you. They adapt to new systems. They remain valuable even when institutions reset. In modern economies, most people confuse credentials with capability. In collapse, that distinction becomes lethal. The question is not what you studied, it's what you can actually produce when systems fail. The fifth reality ties everything together, and it explains why some communities endure while others fragment. Institutions scale trust. Collapse removes it. Local trust replaces it. When governments fail, people do not revert to chaos. They revert to relationships. Family units, neighborhood networks, religious communities, and informal trade systems re-emerge because they predate modern institutions by thousands of years. After the Soviet collapse, survival depended less on wealth and more on embeddedness. Those with trusted networks shared food, labor, and protection. Isolated individuals with savings often fared worse than poorer but connected families. Argentina's bank shutdowns produced neighborhood assemblies not out of ideology, but necessity. Barter replaced currency. Trust replaced contracts. Lebanon's recent collapse shows the same pattern. Institutions weakened. Community structures carried daily life. Modern systems encourage institutional dependency and local isolation. You know your bank, but not your neighbor. You trust logistics chains, but not local producers. This works until it doesn't. When institutions fail, there is no fallback unless you've built one. Networks are not backup plans. They are the original infrastructure. What makes these realities powerful is not that they apply only in collapse. They improve resilience in stable times as well. Hard assets preserve value even without crisis. Productive assets generate income regardless of markets. Low or zero debt reduces fragility. Skills increase opportunity. Community improves quality of life. These are not extreme positions. They are anti-fragile ones. The mistake most people make is waiting for certainty. They want dates, triggers, signals. But collapses are not events. They are processes. By the time confirmation arrives, repositioning is no longer possible. Principles do not require timing. They require alignment. Rome did not fall in a year. It hollowed out. Currency debasement didn't announce the end, it quietly changed behavior. Those aligned with reality adapted. Those aligned with promises suffered. The same mechanics are visible today, not because history repeats perfectly, but because constraints repeat. Debt eventually exceeds productive capacity. Paper claims multiply faster than real output. Institutions grow more brittle as complexity increases. This is not a forecast. It is a pattern. The question is not whether a system continues, but how resilient you are if it doesn't. The people who survive collapses are rarely the most informed or ideological. They are the most structurally aligned. Hard assets over claims. Production over speculation. Ownership over leverage. Capability over credentials. Community over institutions. These 5 principles have survived empires, currencies, and ideologies because they are rooted in human behavior and physical reality. They worked when gold was money. They worked when paper replaced it. They worked under monarchies, democracies, and planned economies. They do not guarantee comfort. They guarantee continuity. Most people don't lose everything because they're careless. They lose everything because they follow rules designed for stability inside systems that no longer exist. Understanding this is not about fear. It's about clarity. If you want to understand how these principles translate into modern conditions, how productive assets function in a digital economy, which skills remain valuable when complexity breaks, and how communities quietly rebuild beneath failing institutions, stay here. Not because collapse is inevitable, but because history is honest about what survives when it arrives. If understanding how these patterns repeat and how people position themselves before systems break is useful to you, subscribe for continued analysis of what history shows comes next.